manipulate this, and allow you only up to one insertion. So you can have, I can only look at 2-point correlators in this. So 5 spins and up to 2-point correlators. So here there's some code that's not relevant, but we'll generate some state. Okay, so this is some state in this. It's a 32-dimensional Hilbert space, and I just generated some. I didn't quite use a hard measure. I used some measure, but I generated some random state in 32 in this 32-dimensional Hilbert space. It's 32 because that's 2 to the 5, and now so now I'll generate the tilde for s tilde 1 1. Okay, so s tilde 1 1 is what I'll generate. So let me just show you what this thing looks like. So you get some horrible matrix, okay? Some totally horrible matrix. So you can solve these linear equations. You solve them, Mathematica solves them. You get some 32 into 32 matrix, which doesn't have any nice structure. Because you know S11 looks very simple. S11 in this basis is trivial. Let me just show you what that is. If you ask for S11, that's some very simple matrix which has some ones here, some ones here, and some ones there. This is S. This is the ordinary spin operator. So in this basis I'm picking, the ordinary spin operator has a very simple form. This tilde operator is some horrible operator, okay? But it has some nice properties. The nice properties it has are that, you know, if you look at its correlator with the ordinary operator, so you take this TS and you take its correlator, you get -1. So it's perfectly anti-correlated with the ordinary operator. Okay? And the nice thing is, as I showed you, so let's say you take this S1 and you look at the commutator. So that's, you know, this operator into TS minus TS into this operator. This commutator annihilates the state. Okay. On the other hand, you can compute the commutator as an operator. This was your question. This is the commutator as an operator. So it's some horrible operator. Okay. It doesn't have any nice meaning, but the commutator as an operator has the property that it annihilates the state. So if you measure the commutator on the state, it's 0. It's some operator, but it's actually 0. Okay. I mean, it's 0 if you measure it on the state. So on the state, it looks like it's 0 for some observer doing simple experiments, but secretly it's some horrible operator in the full Hilbert space. Okay, so this is the flavor of the resolution that I want to give. There are there's some huge Hilbert space in the CFT. There's some huge Hilbert space in the space of quantum gravity. There are these degrees of freedom inside and outside. They have some horrible commutators, you know, which if you look at them, if you are infinitely powerful, you would see these commutators in this big e to the s times e to the s dimensional Hilbert space. But these commutators are somehow designed so that for some observer doing simple local effective field theory measurements or making a limited number of measurements, this observer can't see these non-zero commutators. Okay, so the commutator is non-zero as an operator, which is what causes the strong subadditivity theorem to break down, but it's effectively zero. So that's the resolution. Yeah.
So in this example, the SS are spins in all the spins in the spin chain, right?
Correct. Yes.
And you require the S tildes to have these properties with all the S's.
Correct. So in fact, the non-zero properties only the S
that you should only require, you know, you should think of S only as outside degrees of freedom.
Good. So you could do that. You could say that, you know, you could say that 5 spins have evaporated, and then you could ask for the dual to those 5 spins. So it's true that for the strong subadditivity paradox, that's all that you need. The point I want to make here is also how to solve these operator equations, which is when you have a co-spin set of operators and you want something which is entangled with them. So when you go to these other paradoxes in the CFT, you'll need something. You know. Then, as we discussed yesterday, if you really try to phrase this in the CFT, there isn't a very clear description of which spins have evaporated and which spins haven't. Rather, what is happening is that you have a big Hilbert space. On that Hilbert space, you can measure modes of some single trace operators, and you want to find, you know, the duals of these modes, the mirrors of these modes. So this is how to do that. But you're absolutely right that in the spin chain, what I really need is once 5 of the spins have evaporated, I need the tildes to these 5 spins, and not the tildes to the other guys which are still inside. Yeah, but I mean that's a limitation of my toy model because it's it can't quite distinguish between these things. Okay, good. So let's go back to our thing. So that was okay. So So now I'm going to show you a generalization of this method to the CFT. And as I said, the fundamental point in this generalization is to recognize that you want these operators to behave correctly in the neighborhood of a given state, not everywhere in the Hilbert space. And I'll show you how this can be used to resolve all of the paradoxes that I described yesterday. Okay. So now let me go on to state dependence in EDS CFT. And as I said, there's all these paradoxes that I'll show you arise because we ignored this limitation of bulk effective field theory, which is that it can only probe a region of the Hilbert space. And now I'm going to go to the CFT, and I don't have any spins anymore, so I'm making a transition back to ADS CFT. And now if you have the infalling observer, just as I had a limitation of number of spins, the infalling observer can measure these operators A that we discussed yesterday, and maybe products of these A's up to K such A's. And of course you can measure the Hermitian adjoints of these guys as well. Okay. But the infalling observer is not allowed to measure arbitrary products of modes. So you can measure some product of local fields up to some limit, which is K. And there are two kinds of limitations I need. One of the limitations we already saw in the spin chain, which is that the number of insertions should not be too large. There is another limitation which is important in the CFT that didn't exist in the spin chain, which is that the individual energy of any insertion should be much smaller than the central charge. Okay, so you shouldn't have the infalling observer, if you want to get bulk effective field theory outside and inside the horizon, then you shouldn't be allowed to excite states of arbitrarily high energy, and you shouldn't be allowed to excite states with arbitrarily many insertions. And it's not quite an algebra, even though we often refer to this as an algebra, actually some kind of truncated algebra. That's because there are these cutoffs. So if you really try to take products, you would go outside this cutoff. So it's some kind of truncated operator algebra. And corresponding to this, you can define what we call a little Hilbert space, which you can't see, but it's actually, there's a big Hilbert space here, which the projector doesn't show, and this is a little Hilbert space in that. Okay, so there's a bigger Hilbert space which is surrounding this, which is what this H labels. So the little Hilbert space corresponds to taking the base state psi and acting on it with all of these possible excitations. So this is roughly the set of excitations of the initial state that the infalling observer can explore. And this is the Hilbert space that's relevant for the infalling observer. So you have the infalling observer, he falls into a given state, he can do some set of experiments. And these set of experiments allow him to explore some subsection of the Hilbert space, which we call H psi, which basically involves taking psi and acting on it with A. The reason it's called H psi is because it depends on the state psi. Okay. So you have psi and you can act with A's with A1 or A2, and A's, remember, are products of these polynomials in the modes. And there's a bigger Hilbert space H, which the infalling observer can't access. And just like we had for the spin chain, because the dimension of this algebra is much smaller than the dimension of the full Hilbert space, in general for a generic state, none of these operators actually annihilate the state. Okay, so that zero doesn't, if you try and act on the state with the alpha, you can't annihilate the state. And that's just a physical statement that the infalling observer can't make the black hole vanish by doing some simple effective field theory experiments. And therefore this little Hilbert space in this setup is actually isomorphic to this algebra that I mentioned, as a vector space. Okay, now before I generalize my resolution to the CFT, I need to put in a little bit of dynamics, and the information which I didn't have in the spin chain, and the information about dynamics comes into a classification of what we call equilibrium and non-equilibrium states. So the first thing is what is an equilibrium state. So this is some notation I need to introduce. So an equilibrium state is a state which is time translationally invariant. So it's a state where you take the black hole, and the black hole formed a long time back, and then you haven't disturbed it for a long time. So you're probing things here. And if there's a long time between the formation of the black hole and where you're probing the system, then when you probe the system, you look at correlators between this S and T, or at S plus X and at T plus X, you would get the same answer. So once the black hole settles down, then correlators become time translationally invariant. In fact, they become very time translationally invariant. If you look at some generic state of the CFT, it has the property that if you look at the variation of correlators, with time, so you can measure the variation in terms of seeing how much this correlator varies at time t and at time 0, and you can see typically this variation is suppressed exponentially. Okay, so if you take some generic state, it's a very time translational invariant. This is just a fact about statistical mechanics. And a state that satisfies this, which is almost all states, are equilibrium states. Okay, so now in an equilibrium state, let me define what these mirror operators are. So it's very similar to the definition I had for the spin chain. I'll define it in a slightly different way. So you take an equilibrium state, and as I said, you have this H psi, which is obtained by acting with elements of this algebra on the state. And I define this antilinear conjugate map, okay, which takes, this is this map S, which takes an element of this vector space back to another vector in the Hilbert space, but by means of this conjugation. So it maps A on psi to A dagger on psi, and A, as I said, was product of a polynomial in these modes. And the reason this map exists is because of the physical property we mentioned earlier, that A on psi is never zero. That tells you that these vectors are all linearly independent. These are well-defined linear equations which you can solve for S. I should say that this map is actually, and the reason I wrote it this way, is because this map also appears in the studies of operator algebras and quantum field theory, and this appears in a branch of that called the Tomita-Takasaki theory of modulo automorphisms of von Neumann algebras. Of course, we came on it totally independently by thinking about black holes, but it so happens that people who do study operator algebras and quantum field theory have been thinking about the same map for entirely different reasons. But in any case, you define this map, and then the claim is these tilde operators are defined by taking the ordinary operators, putting in some factors of the Hamiltonian. Okay, so you have e to the minus beta h, e to the beta h, and putting in these two s's. So that's a definition of the tilde operators. So it's just the claim is that this is the definition, and I'll verify for you in a second that it satisfies all the properties. In fact, this is secretly the same as what I did in the spin chain, although I've said it in slightly more fancy language, but it's secretly the same thing. Okay, before let me also tell you how things generalize. Not all states in the CFT are equilibrium states. Some states are near equilibrium states. Now you might be concerned that near equilibrium states occupy only an exponentially small volume in the CFT, and that's true. But all of us, in some sense, are near equilibrium excitations of the equilibrium. In some time, all of us will decay to thermal nothingness, and therefore near equilibrium states are interesting because that's what they are states in which dynamics is happening and something is happening. So even though they are a small subsection of the volume of the Hilbert space, they're still interesting, and we should account for them. So the definition I gave you previously was true for an equilibrium state, but you can have near equilibrium states, which is a state of the following kind. You form a black hole, you wait for some time, and then you send in an additional laser beam from this point here. Okay? So there's a guy at S who sends in a laser beam, and then somebody else jumps in and tries to measure correlators in this red square. Okay? So even though the black hole formed a long time back, there's an additional excitation you made by acting with this U operator, which does affect the observer in this square patch. Okay, so this is a definition of a near equilibrium state, which is basically the state psi, but after you've acted it with a unitary, which is just an exponential of one of the simple elements of the algebra I showed you previously. And given such a state, you can generally uniquely decompose it into a unitary and some base state psi. And given such a state, the claim is that the definition of these mirror operators extends by inserting these factors of U. Okay, so this is and I claim that this has the correct properties. Okay, so now let me show you that these things have the correct. Before that, let me make an additional claim. The claim is that if you take these operators that I defined, these A tilde operators, and you smear them with appropriate mode functions. So these are just functions of some coordinates. And so this operator that I have here is now some operator in the CFT, because A is an operator in the CFT, A tilde is an operator in the CFT, these are functions. And the claim is that if you measure correlators of this field phi in generic states, then it does satisfy the condition I placed yesterday, which is that these correlation functions are indeed the same as semi-classical Green's functions as computed by bulk effective field theory about a black hole background. And so this is explicitly consistent with the properties of perturbative fields propagating about a weakly curved spacetime. And the claim is that these operators phi, which are made out of these A's and these A tildes, where A tildes are constructed as I showed you previously, describe the experience of the infalling observer behind the horizon. Okay, so and they meet in particular all the conditions that we imposed on A tilde previously, as I'll show you in a minute. So the statement that these correlators are correct is the same as the statement that they meet all the conditions in A tilde that we imposed yesterday. Okay. So let me show you how that works. So let's look at the 2-point correlation function. So let's look at A tilde into A omega. And the way that works is, I think I got some factors of, I missed some minus signs. So there should be some minus signs here which I missed. Okay, so sorry about that. But anyway, the factors of S, and you have some factors of the Hamiltonian. And what you see is, this S turns this A omega into an A omega dagger, and the same, and so you can just work through these rules. The S acts on this A omega, turns it into an A omega dagger. These e to the beta h factors give you some factors e to the beta omega. And then you have this S once again that acts on this once again and turns it into a correlator of ordinary operators. Then you have some formula for the correlator of ordinary operators, and you have to put in, so it should all be e to the minus beta omega by 2, and you get the right 2-point function. So you got the typo. You can check also that the commutator works out correctly. You check the commutator, and you can check that you look at A tilde into A omega, and you can just put in these factors of S. S and psi is just itself. S and A is A dagger, and you can check that this will turn into a, regardless of what ordering you put in here, once you put in these factors of S, this becomes the same expression, and therefore the commutator vanishes. The mixed commutator vanishes because it becomes A into A dagger minus A into A dagger. And you can check that these operators have the right algebra amongst themselves, because once you put in these factors of S, it becomes the ordinary A omega into A omega dagger algebra. So you can check they have the right 2-point correlators, they have the right mixed commutators, which is the statement that A tilde commutes with A, within correlation functions of course, and A tilde has the right algebra with itself as well. So you can explicitly check with these factors of S that all the properties that I demanded yesterday work out correctly, and you can see it do this exercise. Okay, so now you could ask, how did this happen, given that I gave you an impossibility theorem, and I gave you all these paradoxes yesterday, and how have I come up with this explicit construction which allows this to work? And the claim is that the reason, the way you sidestep the paradox is by recognizing that the